Hey, 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 Mom Nation, and welcome back to another episode of our love story. I am Katie, the founder of Mom Nation and an associate broker with Team Evo AZ at eXp Realty, and I am here with the very famous, the amazing, licensed couples counselor, Dyanna Eisel. Welcome back.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. It's Friday.
Friday, and it's always amazing to see you. And I'm like,
Likewise.
Really excited to jump into this topic because as we were talking before we hopped on the show, we're feeling it. You guys are feeling it out there. Like every conversation sort of has this lining of the topic we're about to jump into. So guys, before we do that, if you're finding value in these conversations, please do us a favor and click the follow or the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. Like, share. Honestly, like there's got to be a mama or a couple or a sister or a friend in your life that needs to hear these conversations too. So do them a favor and share the conversation with them. So that way we can get this information out to more of the community. So today, with that, we're talking about something that sounds a little funny at first, maybe, but it can actually feel really heavy for couples. And I giggled a little when Dyanna taught me this word, dateflation. Yeah, raise your hand if you're feeling dateflation. The cost is kind of getting out of control, guys. It's going so high that even a simple dinner and a movie can turn into what? What did we say the average was? A $200, $250 night?
The average date night cost in America right now is between $200 and $250.
And that can create some real pressure for couples who are trying to stay connected and have a budget to follow, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if we're not aligned on, what our budgetary restrictions are and also like what spending that amount of money on allocated for this means.
Yeah. So we're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about how rising costs have affected dating, romance, quality time, have added to financial stress, and the way couples, or a couple of ideas for couples to stay intentional without making the connection feel stressful and expensive and another burden, right? Because I don't know about you, but I don't think that our couples and our families out there need another burden, do they?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So Dyanna, when couples start feeling like dating each other has become too expensive or it feels like a burden, what does that do to the relationship over time?
Yeah, it's not just about money, right? It's about quality time. But when quality time is conflated with money, that's when things can get a little tricky. And so often do we find ourselves having to spend money to go out on a date night, even if we do it, an expensive date night, whatever that means anymore. Like you're still paying for childcare, you're paying for a babysitter,
right.
And plus everything that's included in the date too. So when we have a breakdown of like intentional time together, we know that all kinds of things start to break down. Emotional intimacy and trust, consistency, like all of those things start to break down. Does that mean that we have to spend a lot of money to do that? No, but a lot of times that conversation doesn't happen. And so we're just not spending the money on the dates. And then we get stuck in some of these traps that we're going to talk about today that couples find themselves in, and then they end up feeling disconnected. But it does not require spending a ton of money to stay connected so that there isn't a breakdown of intimacy over time in the relationship.
Makes sense. So do you have an example of maybe a flag, a marker, something that somebody might look for and realize that they're just missing that time together, that they just really need to be more intentional about this? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's hard to put your finger on like what exactly that experience is,
right?
But it can feel like disconnect. It can feel like loneliness. It can feel like rejection. It can feel like abandonment. It can feel like all of those like really tough emotions. And when we're ultimately like disconnected, again, since it's so hard to put our finger on, we just automatically assume that there's a problem or that something is wrong or that their partner's doing something wrong, when really it's a systemic issue that like, hey, how am I accountable? How are you accountable? Why is this feeling the way that it is right now? And like, let's talk about it in a very non-blamey way, but like, let's bring it into the room where everyone's aware of it and everyone knows like what's going on. So while it feels hard to identify, everyone feels like a lot of those emotions from time to time. And trying to really spend some time thinking about like, where is this coming from? And how can I loop my partner into this so that they understand where I'm coming from and how I'm feeling, so that we can get to some sort of like solution together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Something that I've noticed quite a lot just in regular conversation or in seeing posts in the Mom Nation group over the years, things like that, is couples are spending time together. And let me give an example. Kids are in bed, it's late night. Maybe we have a television series that we watch together, but I'm on this side of the couch, he's on that side of the couch. And yeah, we're watching that show, but we're also flipping through TikTok and doing all that kind of stuff. So how is that different from actual connection? Because I could totally see some couples, or maybe one person in the couple saying, well, we do spend time together. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, quality versus quantity, right? And we get stuck in this trap. It's the default to the couch, right? So we all love a good couch ride every now and then, right? But we're also, most of us are so chronically burnt out right now just because of, a lot of what we're talking about, but then just like other factors, and life is lifing, what I mean? And so we all feel, overstimulated. Our nervous systems are overstimulated and overwhelmed. And sometimes we just need to like decompress. But contrary to what we believe, doom scrolling or going through TikTok or, binge watching your show for hours doesn't actually do anything really healing for your nervous system. It just kind of like allows you to dissociate. So while we're spending that time, basically parallel existing with each other on the couch, we're not interacting with each other. Like, we're not even really invested in the show because we're on our phones. So we're not even like connecting on like, oh man, that was crazy, did you see that, or whatever. Like, we're not really engaged in that either. And it feels like, well, if you're going to get on your phone, then I'm going to get on my phone. And like, that's just what we're going to do. And so it doesn't necessarily come from a place of malice, but it's like, well, if you're not really invested in spending that time, then like, I'm really not either. And I'm tired anyway. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But how often does that conversation take place where it's like, hey, I know you're tired after work. I'm tired after work. But like, how can we carve out just a little bit of time that feels a little bit more intentional? And then we can absolutely couch rot. I'm not saying that you can't couch rot, you know what I mean? But like, how can we carve a little bit of time out to be intentional, where we put our phones down and we actually talk, not just the, how was your day? It was fine. How was your day? It was fine. And getting a little bit deeper than that. Like, what's on your mind? What's been going on this week? Like, what are you looking forward to? What's stressing you out the most right now? Like, having more of those deeper questions, more of that curiosity can absolutely not be like a huge time suck. Like, you can still have that time to relax, but what sort of quality time is it if we're just existing next to each other? How different is that from being, on a bus next to somebody else who's doing the exact same thing? Like,
a stranger,
strangers on the same couch.
Yeah,
exactly. But it usually comes from a place of overwhelm. Like I said, it's not like, I'm sure there are situations out there where it feels like, you're in a tough spot and maybe we're not talking a lot because we have high conflict or whatever the case may be. But a lot of it just comes from this chronic overwhelm that we're all just really burnt out from a variety of things happening in our lives, but we're not talking about it. And so then we come to our own conclusions, our own narratives about, oh, he doesn't really care about my day, or she doesn't really want to talk to me, or she doesn't really want to sit by me, or no, it has nothing to do with that. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you're feeling so we can find some ways to stay connected and we don't just turn into strangers sitting on the couch watching this show together.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about that conversation a bit. So once we get to that point and, one spouse is like, hey, we have to have a talk, or maybe they both come to the conclusion together that they've got to talk about money and date nights. How can we navigate that conversation without making either spouse feel cheap or boring or controlling or irresponsible with money? For example, and I'll just bring my own personal example into this. So my husband is a spender. I am not. And so when we have the conversation about date night, it becomes just something he wants to incorporate into our budget because he has fun doing that. And he doesn't mind spending that extra toward that, where I have fun doing that. Yes, I want to connect with him. Yes, but it stresses me out to whip that $250 out a night, and let's just say this happens a couple of times a month. Like, that's starting to get a little bit overwhelming for me. I don't want to make him feel like he's irresponsible or, immature, or insert whatever descriptive word you want to put here. I also don't want to feel like I am, just the brakes constantly, or I'm constantly putting a cap on the fun, or I'm the cheap one, I'm the boring one. How can we navigate this conversation together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think some of it has to do with the meanings of money, which we've talked about before in previous episodes. And if we have a good understanding of what the meaning of money is to each other, like, that's a really good place to start. Like, I know that money to you means security. And so when we're spending money, it makes you feel insecure or that we're in danger somehow. And like, that gives you anxiety and stresses you out. Like, I can totally understand that. And for me, it means, freedom. So I want the ability to do like what I want to do with the money that I work really hard for. And so now we just have to like essentially negotiate and come to a good compromise, right? And again, how do you know when you struck a good compromise, which is both people feel like they lost a little bit? Yeah. And so how can we talk about like what feels reasonable for like spending money every month, and then just putting it aside, just putting a budget aside for that. And it is really helpful too, if you're going to put aside money for date night, like to do it in cash, because it's like, it's hard cash. So instead of like, we're only going to spend, $50, and then it's like $62.85. You're like, no problem. Just hand over the debit card. It's like, well, this is all we got. So we need to figure out like how to make this money work. So like, how can we create like a little piggy bank or like a little like separate envelope or whatever works for you to set aside some money that we agree on that doesn't feel like super restrictive, but then it doesn't also feel like, ooh, like I feel like this is dangerous. Like, this is setting my nervous system on fire right now to spend this amount of money on date night. So aligning on the meaning of money and then finding some sort of compromise as to what that looks like. And also, what value do you hold in certain activities? Like, if your partner is a foodie, like they probably find a lot of value in going out to a restaurant and dropping $250 on a dinner. Like, no problem. Like, that's an exciting thing. You know what I mean? But if your partner is just like, like we could go to In-N-Out and that would be fine. And like, we can spend the money somewhere else. You know what I mean? So like, talking about some of the value that you hold in certain activities, and that can go all the way back to like, what means the most to us in terms of quality time? Like, what did we used to do together? What did we used to do that we had the most fun together? How can we bring some of that back, maybe in ways that don't cost as much money, or again, align with what our goals are? Is spending money on these dinners or these dates or whatever, is it keeping us from any sort of long-term goal in our life? Like, is it keeping us from, are we trying to save for a car? Are we trying to save for a house? Are we trying to save for our vacation, college funds, a vacation, like any of those things? Like, are we striving for any of those things? And do we feel like spending this money is going to keep us from doing that? And I think that comes up a lot more often now than I think it used to. In fact, there was a study that came out that I talked to you about earlier that 40% of millennials feel like dating and like date nights and spending the money on dating is getting in the way of their long-term financial goals. That's almost half an entire generation that feels like, hey, me going out on dates and dating is keeping me and making it take longer for me to afford some big ticket items that I need in my life. So that's huge. That's a massive number of people that feel that way. So how can we open up the conversation differently by asking our partner, like, are there any barriers here to like what we want to accomplish? Are there things that we should be saving for? I want to be saving for. Let's just align on what we're willing to sacrifice or not, so that we're all on the same page and nobody feels like they're getting steamrolled.
Yeah, I agree. I love the idea about having a fund. I feel like you can even make that like a really fun thing, like create a jar or something, and it's your date jar. And then, it could be an exciting sort of thing that you could create, almost like a fun little game. But you brought something up that I thought was really interesting, and it sounded to me like some common traps that couples might fall into. So as they're trying to align, and I'm sure you deal with this a lot in, what you do in the couples that you see in your office, but as they're trying to align on budgeting for dates, what couple of traps can you share that come to mind that is common to fall into?
Well, we talked about, the default couch trap. That's certainly one. Financial anxiety, which we just talked about, is another one. And then there's another one that's really interesting that I don't think we think a lot about until, like, we were talking about it before the show, which is we have, as a society, linked the amount of money that's spent on a date to, like, your value or your worth as a person or as a partner. So if you're spending a lot of money on me on a date, that must mean that you care a lot about me. And like, what do you mean? We're only spending $50 tonight because we're going to go to Taco Bell and go to the movies? Like, do you really even care about me that much? And that's such a trap because it doesn't have anything to do with romance if it really just boils down to, financial strain or anxiety and spending, but like we've always thought that. It feels like it's just been this idea or this truth that people have experienced that's like, oh yeah, if they spend a lot of money on dinner, then like, yeah, they must really like you. You know, so like they don't really like me if like we go through the drive-through and then go to a movie, like that means they don't really like me. And so that puts a lot of pressure on people too. That puts a lot of pressure on, the whole courting process, even before being in a relationship and dating. And it puts pressure on the relationship. Like, ooh, if I only spend this much money on a date, are they going to think that like I don't care about them as much? Right. And so that's a really significant trap that I think a lot of people find themselves in and don't really talk about that one either.
That's giant. Because as I think about it, I'm like, okay, let's trace that back. Where does that come from? We're victims of being conditioned by marketing from people or companies that want to sell us stuff. And that's kind of where my train of thought goes, right?
Absolutely.
Like, isn't that, this is such a tangent, but isn't that like why we have some holidays? I heard that, like, we have some holidays so that Hallmark can sell more cards. You know what I mean? Like, I literally have heard some of our holidays were created because of a marketing thing.
And how much money do we spend based on this fallacy that you have to spend money on those holidays for the sake of those holidays?
Yeah. Does Valentine's Day come up for you? When we think about that,
it's the first thing that comes up for me. So am I going to spend $50 on this, on these roses and this giant box of chocolates? Or am I just going to buy this $5 box of chocolates? And they're just going to be like, oh, like, I guess I'm not that high on the priority list for you. But you were able to buy, McDonald's on your way home for lunch the other day. And it's like, oh boy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that being fed to us that our worth and value, it keeps people spending when worth and value are connected to it.
When did it's the thought that counts, go out the window? Like, when did that go out the window? I don't even know.
It's a great question. Where did the thought that counts go out the window? I think that takes us into like the next trap, which is creative burnout. I think a lot of people are experiencing, as we talked about at the very beginning, like burnt out on just everything. Like life is lifing really hard, money and otherwise. And it takes a lot more creativity, a lot more imagination, a lot more thought to come up with a date that doesn't cost a lot of money. Yeah. Right? Like it doesn't really take any thought to pick up the phone and make a reservation for somewhere. Like that doesn't really take any thought. Maybe it might be their favorite restaurant. Like you get a point for that one, but like, where's the creativity for like, how can we make the most out of what we already have and have some fun with it? And I think we're just so, again, chronically burnt out that we're not taking that time to be creative. We're looking to check a box. So like, oh man, we haven't gone on a date night in the last month. So he or she, they're going to be all over me, like asking, like, am I going to plan something? And so let me I'll make the reservation. Oh, let's get the movie tickets. That looks like a good movie. And then like, that's it. And so we filled the quota. You know what I mean? We filled the quota for the date instead of like, okay, we're not in dire straits here, like in terms of connection or spending time together. Like, let's take our time and take a little bit more time to figure out like what would be more fun, what would be creative that doesn't require a lot of money. And if the kid is sick or you can't get a babysitter or whatever, it doesn't mean like, well, there goes that. Like, we're not spending time together. Like, let's try again next month after that bug has run through the whole family. You know what I mean? Right. Like, no, it doesn't have to be canceled. We can find some other ways to connect.
I love that. And what's the mindset shift, or any tools or any suggestions on making that mindset shift so that you're not labeling your less expensive choice as like a downgrade?
The value of our connection doesn't have a dollar amount on it.
That's big.
The value and the worth of our relationship doesn't have anything to do with money.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's something we do on the cheap or something that we do big, fine, but our worth and our connection, our value as a couple does not get measured by a certain amount of money. And when we untangle all these beliefs that we have about that and what spending money means, like when you're dating or when you're in a relationship, then it suddenly just becomes this like, oh, well, at least we're spending the time together, and we may not have it in the budget right now to like go out to a $200 dinner, but like, let's have some fun with this, because it's all about the value and the worth of our relationship and the quality time that we're spending together, and not just, feeding late stage capitalism machines.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. So because we talked before the show, I love the checklist that you shared with me, because it has some really neat ideas on there, and it makes things a little bit easier. So when we're talking about being burnt out and having decision fatigue and having creative fatigue, all those things, like, I get that 100%. And when are date nights for most people? I mean, I don't want to generalize, but Friday, Saturday nights, would you say? So like, that's at the end of the week. We've probably worked all week. We've done the kids' school thing all week. Like, so I can totally feel the fatigue, right? Do we want to share the checklist and maybe talk about it a little bit? Okay. Absolutely. I'll let you take the wheel on this because this is your checklist, girlfriend. But for those that are just listening to the podcast version rather than watching on your screen, this is Dyanna's Dateflation Checklist to keep your relationship rich while keeping your bank account happy. So thank you, Dyanna.
Absolutely. I think this is a cool tool for people to use and just get some ideas from. So I go through like 3 points here where like, first, like align on your budget. So we talked a little bit about that already. So like, sync your calendar to have like a little sit down. And this, if we're looking like macro here, like it doesn't have to just be about budget in these meetings, right? Like we've talked about having weekly marriage meetings and things like that in previous episodes. This is the time to talk about that. Like this is the time to talk about the budget for the week, the budget for the month. And then establish like, a rotation, like an A/B rotation. So like the date night this month is going to be like a spendy one. And then next month, it's going to be like more of like a creative date night. And so then you can just like alternate. So it feels like there's a little bit more balance, especially for those two individuals that one might really want to like spend more money and the other one doesn't. So like, this is like that fair compromise where like you can rotate through them. And then setting a hard cap. We talked about budgeting, setting some money aside, definitely put some cash aside because that's, it's non-negotiable. This is all the cash we have, is all we got. Yep. And then, look through like your subscriptions, like if you guys share anything together, some people have like, couples sharing apps or like it says dating apps, but we're talking about like, the apps where like you can ask each other a question and things like that. Like if you're not using them or you have any other shared platforms, apps, whatever, get rid of them, allocate that money to like something else. And so then after we've aligned on like what that budget is, then you can go into like, what's your low cost adventure? And then, what do we want to do that's like maybe more spendy on those like, alternating months. So I put in some, stay in night, date night ideas on there. One of them that I think is really fun is like doing it like a Chopped challenge. If anyone has seen that show Chopped, they have a very limited amount of ingredients and then they have to cook something with it. And then
I love it.
So I love it. Go to the kitchen, everyone gets 3 or 4 ingredients, you give them to your partner and they have to make something creative with it. And then you get to like critique it, which I think is a lot of fun. I just think that's a really cool idea. And then something that I think everyone could use, a little bit of a digital detox. So like, let's put our phones down. We're not using screens for, 2 hours. We can play a board game. We can talk. We could do anything else, but like, let's put the screens away because we have enough of that in our face all the time.
Absolutely.
So, a couple other ideas, is like the trivia showdown, right? Like doing some trivia, and you can make that really fun. You could make that based on anything like past experiences. Hey, our vacation, do you remember? Or anything like that, like times that you've spent together. Like, when we went out to that fancy dinner in, Mexico, like what was I wearing? Do you remember the color of my dress? Or do you remember what my shoes looked like? Or anything like that? Just like to get you guys connecting again on like some of that shared meaning, which also loops into emotional intimacy too.
I love that. What if, and not to interrupt you, but something just came to mind. When it comes to getting to know each other a little bit better, I feel like sometimes couples either don't have the time or don't take the time, or it just kind of, slips their mind to do so. But you could even do that trivia thing on like, what about stuff from before we met? Like, things, where I went to college, or, what was my favorite color when I was a kid, or something like that. I don't know. It was just a thought that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. Things that, only they would probably know, which again creates more shared meaning and emotional intimacy. You could definitely have a lot of fun with that. So like, those are some activities that you could do if you need to stay in. So a great example is the baby, you can't get a babysitter, the kid is sick, whatever. So like, these are ones that like you have to like stay in for. And then I put some ideas for like going out. And there's a couple on there that you guys can, look through. But I think my favorite one is the thrift store swap, which I think is really funny.
I love thrifting.
Thrifting is so fun, right?
Yes.
But like, if you go and like, you divide up and you go find something, like spend a couple bucks on like, a really like crazy outfit for your partner, and then they have to come home and like put it on and put on like a little fashion show. And I just think that's hysterical. I think that's such a fun way to interact and just have some fun with it,
My hubby would be so funny. He would totally do that. Totally.
He absolutely would. I can absolutely see that.
Oh yeah, that's right up his alley.
I love it. So there's a couple other ideas for you guys on there too, for like doing things out and about. And then afterwards, talk about like, how did it go? Like, what really worked? What did we like? What did we not like? How much money did we save by doing this low cost date or staying in or whatever? Like, if we would have typically spent $200 or $250 and we spent, nothing on swapping and doing a chop challenge in our kitchen because it was stuff we already had, or we spent $20 at the thrift store and like that was cool, or we went through the drive-through because we're trading off what fast food we're gonna have, and like I only spent this much, so you can talk about like how much you saved, and if you saved money from whatever you budgeted for that date, whatever you saved, put it into savings. Put it towards the next vacation.
Towards the next date. Yeah.
Put it towards the next like spendy date, so you might end up with more than you have for your budget for the next month. So whatever it is that you guys decide to do with it is cool, but talking about it and having that conversation keeps you guys connected on finances, which, as we know, is one of the most difficult things for couples to talk about and causes the most conflict. Yeah. So not only does this provide some ways to combat dateflation, right? But it also keeps us talking about money as big things and big ticket items come up in our lives.
Yeah, 100%. And just for everybody out there listening and watching, I actually have the links in the show notes for the episode that we did on the money talk, because that was a big one. Mm-hmm. And also the marriage meeting. So those are accessible there for you guys. This was an awesome, thank you so much, Dyanna. This really was a topic that, again, like we said at the top of the show, doesn't get enough floor time. And what I heard throughout this entire episode, what I heard you say is that healthy relationships just need intentional time together. And that intent, or that intentional time, does not have to be expensive, does not have to strain our budgets. I feel like, and you see a lot of couples, so I'm sure that you see this a lot, but would you agree that sometimes the most connected moments happen when couples stop like performing the romance, or, you know, trying to create the romance just for the optics of it versus the actual intent of connection, and just simply start paying attention to one another.
Absolutely, 100%. And that starts with identifying and recognizing what roles we've been playing and what roles we've been expected to play. And that has everything to do with gender roles, which could be for a whole other episode. But, you know, a lot of pressure comes down on men's, and specifically, you know, they've been conditioned that like that's their job or whatever, to, you know, spend a lot of money to impress the girl and like all of that stuff. And untangling that is it takes a lot of intentional effort to get ourselves out of that and recognize that, hey, it's actually not where my worth is to spend all this money on these expensive dates or gifts or whatever, especially in, you know, the age of, you know, social media, the comparison trap. You know, you see all these people like, oh, my husband bought these roses for no reason and got all of my favorite things. And it's like, cool, but like, that's not really attainable for a lot of people. And so now we're left to think like, oh, well, then does my partner not love me as much then? Are they not thinking about me as much? And, you know, if they really wanted to, they could save up enough money and do these things for me. And so social media is constantly in our face showing us like, what is, you know, a quality relationship and what isn't. And it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real.
Right, right. And it depends on who you're watching too, because you could be watching an influencer that has a brand deal or whatever they call them, affiliation or whatever, with a certain thing that they're promoting. And
Absolutely.
it could totally not even be true, right?
Absolutely. You have no way of knowing, but they have a stake in it somehow.
Right, right. Man, it's wild out there.
It's crazy out there for sure.
All right, guys, we hope that you enjoyed this and that it was a little bit of a break from the wildness out there. And hopefully this gave you an aha moment, and this was helpful for you and your relationship. If you guys want to check out any of our previous episodes, hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at Mom Nation USA. Scroll down just a little ways. You will see the Our Love Story playlist. Each and every one of our episodes are there. If you prefer to listen podcast style on your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for Mom Nation Talk Radio. There you will find us as well. Click the notification. The little bell is what I'm talking about. The little bell notification if you have it on your platform, or the plus sign or the follow sign. Anything that you can find that keeps you connected to us, and you'll never miss a beat. We'll see you next time, Dyanna. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Struggling to reconnect with yourself or the ones you love? Meet Dyanna Eisel, a licensed marriage and family therapist, here to support your journey toward connection and clarity. She helps you feel seen, heard, and supported as you grow through life's challenges, emotionally, sexually, and relationally. A safe, judgment-free space where growth can begin. Come as you are and grow into who you're becoming. Reach out today and take your first step toward healing with Dyanna.